Something that's not really a surprise to anyone, the majority of the Hypixel player base is on the younger side, averaging an age somewhere around 13 to 15 years old. A lot are even younger than that, or older. Some are fossils in internet years like me, but that's where most players are. So when many of them have looked into volunteering for the staff team, they find they aren't old enough with the 16-year age requirement. At that point, they may decide to simply wait until they are old enough, which would be the more proper and mature response. But others begin suggesting and petitioning to allow younger players to apply for staff without taking a moment to look into why the age requirement is set where it is in the first place. To this day, there's still frequent inquiries from younger folks wanting to join the Hypixel staff team, which is admirable, but it's been tried and failed before in the past, so that's what we'll be talking about today. Tell a little story for those who weren't around during this time, bring some nostalgia to those who were, and with any luck, maybe you'll even learn a little something. In the server's initial year, the age requirement was actually set at 14 years old, although there were not many younger staff members, but the requirement was bumped up a couple years sometime around the end of 2013, because the admins decided it was too low. But then several months later, in preparation for summer 2014, the staff team introduced the Junior Helper program to help with the influx of players, since it's typically a busy time on the server with everyone on summer vacation, and the Hypixel network also growing drastically at the time. With the program, players as young as 14 could once again apply to be staff. The junior helper position would be similar to a normal helper, hanging out in game lobbies and answering questions, but they essentially had no permissions at all. They couldn't mute or kick players. They were basically just the same as normal players, just with a fancy tag. Groups of junior helpers were assigned to individual moderators for training and guidance, and certain junior helpers who excelled during the program would be promoted to helpers at the end of the summer, with the rest being demoted and removed from the staff team, with the entire process repeating once the program returned for the winter holiday season later the same year. Because of the junior helpers not really having any permissions to do anything like punishments, they had to be monitored almost constantly, which was difficult for their moderator mentors who were assisting with this program, because it essentially doubled the work they had to do for the server, having to keep up with their moderation duties alongside babysitting the junior helpers. I wasn't one of them since I was a mod at the time, but I knew some of my fellow moderators who were, and it wasn't always a great time for everyone involved. Most junior helpers were often overwhelmed by being a staff member on such a large server, even though it was only a fraction of the size Hypixel is today, since they weren't used to having to interact with so many people at one time or dealing with the harassment. Worse than the harassment staff normally receive, some players were relentless in their treatment of the junior helpers, since they had almost no authority, and unfortunately some would take advantage of that. It got to the point that was so awful, a new policy was enacted giving anyone who harassed junior helpers an immediate 3-day mute, which for the time, when hackers could be banned for only a week, was considered quite a long punishment back then. I don't think even any harassment punishments at the time were a single day, probably no more than just a few hours. With the stricter policies of current Hypixel, it would probably be like the equivalent of a 3-month mute on the first offense. Some even continued poking at certain female junior helpers and got themselves banned. With all this stress, many junior helpers showed they lacked the maturity or responsibility needed to handle a position like this. And it wasn't entirely their fault, though it did lead to instances where they would crack under the pressure. Best case scenario, they would resign, but some did lash out either to players, to other staff, or just went completely no contact with their group leader and be MIA. Out of all the junior helpers who did remain on the team, there's only 2 that I know of who are still staff today at the time of recording this, who are the admins Silent But Deadly, the QA lead, and pjoke1, one of the customer support agents. There might be more than that, but those are the only ones who immediately come to mind. So of course it is absolutely possible for younger players to do well and succeed and advance up the ladder on the staff team, and Silent and pjoke both do a great job as far as I've seen, but this is only 2 people out of the many junior helpers who volunteered years ago. Even at the time, only a small percentage of junior helpers were actually able to be promoted promoted and stay on the staff team. The junior helper program didn't seem like a terrible idea on paper. More staff members equals more productivity and efficiency on the network. At least in theory. In reality, it wasn't executed properly and ended up being a complete disaster. Not only were younger players entirely unprepared, but admins have even admitted that it wasn't fair to make it a temporary rank meant to be taken away within a month or two. But all in all, the time and effort would have been much better spent just training and bringing in regular helpers that meet the requirements. There are some younger people who can be mature for their age, but there are very few. Most like to believe they're mature, but they actually still have a lot to learn and experience. Which isn't a bad thing, it's just part of growing up. I look back at myself at all ages and realize now I wasn't nearly as grown up as I thought I was. I can understand that people want to help out on the server, and again, that's great. But instead of complaining and pushing to change the requirement for your own benefit, it's important to show patience, which is a very critical component of being staff. If you're being impatient and saying you don't want to wait until you meet the requirement, that's just gonna show you aren't ready to join the team yet. There are ways you can still help out the server even without a staff rank, like making reports, answering questions from other players as long as you're giving correct information. You don't need to be on the team for that. As of right now, the staff team is being revamped, and after months of helper applications remaining closed, it seems like the rank may be removed entirely. I can't say it's a terrible decision, but I am curious to see how they'll prepare any new staff to join the moderators. There's also a new rank that's said to be the next step beyond the normal moderators called Game Master. Whoever came up with that name, A for effort, but yikes. Name choice aside, supposedly this new rank is going to have a bigger impact on the everyday player experience and better serve the community. Which, if it's successful, then it can have whatever silly name they want. I've been saying for years that the server is understaffed and could use more help, and I'm glad the team is going in a direction that doesn't involve bringing in younger members. If I had to guess, and keep in mind this is complete speculation, but the Game Master rank could be sort of a senior mod rank, and maybe these mods are assigned to specific games, hence the Game Master title, which honestly I know a lot of players have requested something like that to get the games they love more attention, but staff have been saying since the beginning of time something like that isn't going to work because staff members are supposed to be available everywhere. Restricting staff members to certain parts of the server would be very inefficient unless there's a lot more members that can be spread around. Again, I could be entirely wrong on this rank's new purpose. We'll just have to wait and see, but I am cautiously optimistic with the new-ish staff management since they seem to be holding on the fort fairly well lately. But I hope any younger folks who are eager to join the staff team will take the information in this video to heart. I know it's a bummer having to wait, but it is ultimately for the best. So let me know what you think in the comments. Have you ever considered applying for the Hypixel staff team? And if so, why? Or did you already apply and how did it go? Or just comment anything you feel like, honestly. Engagement pushes my video in the wonky YouTube algorithm, so it's a massive help. As is giving the video a like if you enjoyed it, which I would greatly appreciate. Thank you everyone for watching. I'd like to give an extra special thank you to my executive producer tier patrons Doha, Emily, Jordan, Tinixfan, and Zahilla. I've got some big changes coming to my channel very soon, and it would not be possible without your incredible support, so truly, thank you so very much. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time, I will see you all later. Bye!